Hello and welcome. This video is called Believing in God Makes Sense. Right now we have voices in our culture that are basically trying to make the case that believing in God just doesn't make sense. It's unreasonable, it's illogical, it's silly, it's ridiculous, it's religulous, as Bill Maher would say. And I'm not here to change your mind if you don't believe in God, or if you're on the fence, if you're an agnostic or an atheist. But I'm making the case that believing in God does make sense. It's not some weird, warped, backwards, superstitious nonsense perspective. Believing in God does make sense, and I want to make that case today. Looking back, there are many people that believe that believing in God makes sense. There's a quote from Charles Darwin, who is noted as the father of evolutionary biology. He said in his book, The Descent of Man, "The question of whether there exists a creator and ruler of the universe has been answered in the affirmative by some of the highest intellects that have ever existed." So that's Charles Darwin, and many look at Darwin and his theory of evolution as this attack on Christianity, and perhaps it is, but it isn't as if Charles Darwin just didn't believe in God's existence. Later on in his life, I read that he was less reluctant to talk about God, and he probably didn't believe in God in the sense that, or the same way that modern Christians would. That's okay by me. But the main thing is that believing in God, believing in a creator of some kind, made sense to Darwin. And that is significant. It's not necessary for somebody to say they don't believe in God and then act as if atheism is the only logical option, really. I was reading a quote from an atheist philosopher named Julian Baggini, and I'm sure I'm butchering his name. In his book, Atheism, A Very Short Introduction, he said on page 88, "It is quite one thing to disagree with religion, and quite another to think that the best way to counter it is by oppression or making atheism the official state credo. What happened in Soviet Russia is one of the reasons why I personally dislike militant atheism." He wrote, "When I heard someone recently say that they really thought religious belief was some kind of mental illness, and that they look forward to a time in the future when religious believers would be treated as such, I could see an example of how militant atheism could lead to totalitarian oppression." Basically, you have there an atheist philosopher who is speaking against this, what he calls militant atheism, that says we should get rid of all religions, we should just get rid of all belief in a God, it's all ridiculous, it's all nonsense. And I agree with him. I'm not interested in being militant either way. I think this dogmatism, this dogmatic assertion that I know I'm right and I know you're wrong, that's what's ruining our world in many ways. And yes, I understand that oftentimes it is religious people who come across that way. That's unfortunate. If you're an atheist or an agnostic, the way I look at it is, I believe there is a God. You believe there is no God. We both have a belief, but neither of us know for sure. And as long as neither of us know for sure, then It's okay for us to have enough mental flexibility and, I have to say, emotional maturity to say, I think I'm right, we disagree, and that's okay. Your position is valid and legitimate, and my position is valid and legitimate, and that's okay. Oftentimes what happens, discussions about God or atheism or science and faith, they break down because at some point each person is trying to convince the other one that they're right. And when you watch a debate about religion or God or atheism, after a while, both sides are trying to convince the other that I'm right, you're wrong. No, I'm right, you're wrong. That at some point a sarcastic edge gets into the conversation. Sometimes very quickly. This happens most often in social media debates on atheism and religion. But even in face-to-face conversations, if they're discussing, debating atheism, religion, faith, science, and all that, it won't be too long until there is a sarcastic edge to both of their voices, and a condescending tone gets in there. You know how it is, and neither one is listening to the other one. And both walk away saying, well, I won the argument. I won that debate. I'm right, they're wrong. And it's just unnecessary. Really it is. Believing in God makes sense. It does. And you can say you don't believe in God, and I can respect you and respect your position. But I can also respect my position as a believer, as a theist, as a Christian, and I can say, you know what, my position is very valid for many reasons. We know that the universe had a beginning. That's one of the things that we know about the universe. Stephen Hawking is quoted as saying that the universe had a beginning. And if the universe had a beginning, that means something began the universe. In the book, The Universe in a Nutshell, Hawking said, the observation that we have all made that the sky in the night is dark is very meaningful. It implies that the universe cannot have existed forever. Now, if you watched on YouTube the debate a few years back between Ray Comfort and Kirk Cameron versus the Rational Response Squad, the Rational Response Squad members were trying to make the case that belief in God doesn't make sense, it's illogical, because perhaps the universe always existed. And if the universe always existed, then there's no need to even consider that there was a creator that at least began the universe. But here we have Stephen Hawking, who is no longer with us, who at the end of his life really didn't believe in God's existence, but he says that the universe cannot have existed forever. Something must have happened in the past, he said, to make the stars light up a finite time ago. Not infinite, a finite time ago. Which means that the light from very distant stars has not had time to reach us yet. So that's Hawking speak for the universe did not have existed forever. So, did Hawking come to believe in God's existence? No. He said, because there is a law such as gravity, the universe can and will create itself from nothing. Spontaneous creation is the reason that there is something rather than nothing. Why the universe exists and why we exist. it is not necessary to invoke God to light the blue touch paper and set the universe going. Well, I have to respectfully disagree. He was arguing for spontaneous creation. Where else do we see spontaneous creation, though? He thinks that because the law of gravity exists, therefore, to him it made sense that the universe can create itself from nothing. Where do we see anything creating itself? How many examples can we look at of things, of complex systems just creating itself? Now, you might think that Stephen Hawking's position makes sense. Okay, fair enough. I disagree, and I'm still saying that believing in God makes sense. Let me quote Isaac Newton. He said, "So then gravity may put ye planets into motion, but without ye divine power, it could never put them into such a circulating motion as they have about ye sun. And therefore, for this, as well as other reasons, Isaac Newton said, I am compelled." He was compelled as a scientist, quote, "to ascribe ye frame of this system to an intelligent agent." Without even saying the word God or creator, he was referring to God. And by the way, it personally doesn't make any difference to me if someone uses the word God or not. That's semantics. Someone can use the word God or creator or maker. Isaac Newton referred to God as intelligent agent. You know, you can say infinite intelligence or infinite power. But believing in this infinite intelligence or infinite power makes sense. We don't see examples of highly complex systems just spontaneously coming into being. And may I dare say that when you try to defend that kind of stuff, it sounds silly. There's a YouTube video where Professor Richard Hawkins says that nothing can create something, and he's trying to define nothing. And the audience begins to chuckle, and he's like taken aback that the audience there was laughing. He's like, "What are you all laughing about?" And he was debating some Roman Catholic cardinal, I think, and the cardinal was like, "Well, I think they're all laughing because you're trying to define nothing." And then the audience laughed again. So I'm not saying atheism is ridiculous or Dawkins is deluded. I'm not going to go there. I'm going to say that believing in God makes sense, and when you keep straining to try to somehow prove that there is no way that there was any kind of creator, it just sounds illogical. I'm sorry, it does. We have many atheists who, with high intellects, who came to the conclusion that believing in God makes sense. Marilyn Adamson, who wrote in How an Atheist Found God, she said, "I concluded that the evidence for God was so strong that it made more sense to believe in God than to believe he wasn't there." Lee Strobel, atheist, he said, "It was the evidence from science and history, not scripture, not a religion, not the Bible. It was the evidence from science and history that prompted me to abandon my atheism and become a Christian." George Greenstein, he wrote in The Symbiotic Universe, as we survey all the evidence, the thought insistently arises that some supernatural agency, or rather agency, must be involved in the creation of the universe. So believing in God makes sense. If the universe began to exist, and the most prevailing and accepted theory of the origin of the universe is that the universe began to exist, then the universe had to have a cause. Everything that began to exist has a cause. And what I'm sharing here is not new for me, it's not unique to me really. Even Hawking said that the universe had a beginning. Stephen Hawking said in his book, Brief Answers to the Big Questions, he said that at the moment of the Big Bang, an entire universe came into existence, and with it space. It all inflated, just like a balloon being blown up. So where did all this energy and space come from? How does an entire universe full of energy, the awesome vastness of space, and everything in it simply appear out of nothing? And this is where he gets into the answer of God, but then he goes in the direction of saying, no, there was no God. Simply the laws of the universe, or the laws of gravity, spontaneously made the Big Bang happen. And I say no. I say belief in a creator makes sense. And when I say creator, at this point I'm not referring to an old man on a throne way up in the sky somewhere with a long beard and a long white robe. I'm not referring to any particular version or understanding of God at this point. I'm simply referring to a creator, as Darwin referred to. A creator, the intelligent agent that Isaac Newton referred to. Because once you say that, well, the laws of the universe or gravity just made the universe happen, you have to ask, well, where did those laws come from? Laws of the universe, law of gravity. We understand by life that all laws come from something. Civil laws come from the government. Anytime you see a law anywhere, somebody created the law. That's just life. It's how it is. So believing in God makes sense. If the universe had a beginning, and that is the most agreed upon position of most of science, then the universe had a cause. Everything that began to exist has a cause. There's nothing that you and I could refer to that began to exist that didn't have a cause. So God can be defined as simply the first cause. And again, I'm not the first one to say all this. What I'm saying here is not unique to me, and that's okay. It's okay. But I'm simply saying that if you believe in God, it makes sense to believe in God. Belief in God is not blind faith. It's not wishful thinking. It's not, I hope, maybe, possibly, there's a God. Anthony Flew, who was a famous atheist philosopher, He said that he began to change his mind and move from atheism to believe in God's existence. And he said, I must stress that my discovery of the divine has proceeded on a purely natural level, without any reference to supernatural phenomena. In other words, he didn't have a miracle. It wasn't by reading the Bible. It wasn't by a Christian revival service. It wasn't a Christian evangelist. It wasn't anything like that. He says, it has been an exercise in what has traditionally been called natural theology. It has had no connection with any of the revealed religions. That's okay. I'm not making a video pushing religion. And that's why I was so frustrated with the debate between Ray Comfort and Kirk Cameron and the Rational Response Squad. Because the Rational Response Squad kept giving their arguments opposing belief in God, and a lot of what they were saying was simply that they were opposing religion. Well, that's okay. In many respects, religion is in big trouble. And there are many, many toxic versions of religion. So this is not, hey, become religious. No, it's to say, belief in a creator makes sense. So, Anthony Flew, I'm sorry, I digress. Anthony Flew said that his process of becoming a believer in a creator had no connection with any of the revealed religions, nor do I claim to have had any personal experience of God or any experience that might be called supernatural or miraculous. In short, he said, my discovery of the divine has been a pilgrimage of reason, not of faith. And I'm okay with that. I'm not feverishly hoping that Anthony Flew decided to join my religion. Believing in God makes sense. Charles Hard Towns, Nobel Prize winner back in '64, won a Nobel Prize in physics and founder of laser science. Charles Towns said, I strongly believe in the existence of God based on intuition, observations, logic, and also scientific knowledge. Believing in a creator is logical and based upon observation and scientific knowledge, according to a Nobel Prize winner in physics and the founder of laser science, Charles Hard Towns. So, what does logic say? Logic says that if you see a painting, you know that there's a painter. You don't have to go and meet the painter. I don't need irrefutable proof that there was a Michelangelo or a Picasso. The existence of their works of art is proof enough. If you see a car, you know that there was a car maker. You got a book, you know there was an author. No spontaneous creation involved. You don't have to go and meet the actual people that made your vehicle. You know that your vehicle was made by some people, somebody. If you see a building, you know there was a builder. The existence of the building is proof enough of the builder, or probably builders, plural. So, when you see a design, there's a designer. And what we have in the universe is intelligent design. That phrase, intelligent design, it makes sense. The galaxies, the stars, all of it. So, believing in God is logical, it's reasonable, it's not religulous, as Bill Maher says. I like Bill Maher. He's a funny guy. I would agree with a lot of things that Bill Maher has to say, but not regarding God. Maybe even about religion, but not about God. So, if you see a painting, you know there's a painter. If you see a book, there was an author. If you see a building, there was a builder. When you see a universe, there was a universe maker. It made sense to Darwin. It made sense to Charles Towns. It makes sense to Anthony Flew. It made sense to even Einstein. Einstein believed in some version of God, not a theistic version, as in the world religions. He believed in more of the pantheistic, or you might say panentheistic, God of Baruch Spinoza. I'm okay with that. I don't need to say that Einstein became a believer or a follower of my religion. It's not necessary. In the book by Walter Isaacson, Einstein, His Life and Universe, Einstein is quoted as saying, "You may call me an agnostic, but I do not share the crusading spirit of the professional atheist." And that's what we have right now in our culture. We have a lot of armchair professional atheists who are trying to make the case that believing in God is illogical, irrational, stupid, wrong, dumb, foolish, on and on. Now, Einstein said, "I do not share the crusading spirit of the professional atheist, whose fervor is most likely due to a painful act of liberation from the fetters of religious indoctrination received in youth." In other words, a lot of times somebody got burned by religion. And I get that, man. But people got burned by religion, and in their zeal to become independent from religion, they want to go so far as to say that believing in a creator is foolish and dumb and stupid. No, Einstein said, "I prefer an attitude of humility." I think we all need a dose of humility, for sure. I prefer an attitude of humility corresponding to the weakness of our intellectual understanding of nature and of our own being. You don't have all the answers. I don't have all the answers. And that's okay. And a dose of humility will help us to not be so condescending and make ourselves into jerks by saying, "I'm right and you're wrong." No, I'm right and you're wrong. What you believe is dumb. Well, what you believe is moronic. What are you dumb? You imbecile? No, I'm smart. You're the imbecile. And on and on and on. And people will talk like that on social media, mostly. Behind the computer screen, everyone's 10 feet tall and made of steel. But believing in the Creator makes sense. So, if you don't believe in God, if you're an atheist, I respect you and your position. I won't say that your perspective is dumb or stupid or silly or irrational or illogical. I believe it makes more sense that there is a creator. But you know what? In the words of Einstein and the humility that he spoke of, I will say that I could be wrong. I believe that there is a creator. But I could be wrong. Now, if you're an atheist, can you say that you could be wrong? Considering the words of Einstein and Darwin and Isaac Newton and all those scientists, people who are smarter than I am and you are, in light of the Nobel Prize winners who have talked about having a belief in a creator, and considering the logic that every painting has a painter, every book has an author, every car or vehicle has an automaker, every building has a builder, every design has a designer. In light of that simple logic, if you're an atheist, are you saying that there is no possibility at all that you're wrong? Are you saying that there is no chance whatsoever that there is a creator? How about we all have some humility and say, I don't have all the answers, and you don't have all the answers, and I could be wrong, and you could be wrong. But I'm not saying become religious. I'm not saying join my religion. I'm not saying go to church or synagogue this weekend. I'm simply saying believing in God makes sense. And I close with a quote from Professor John Lennox, teacher of mathematics and philosophy of science at Oxford University. He said, "You can't explain the universe without God." He said, "Contrary to what Hawking claims, physical laws can never provide a complete explanation of the universe. Laws themselves do not create anything." I have to agree. That makes sense. They are merely a description of what happens under certain conditions. So believing in God makes sense. Believing in a creator makes sense. Everything that began to exist has a cause. So before you say, well, I believed in God, and I prayed for my aunt or my grandma who was sick to be healed, and they weren't healed, so I don't believe anymore. If that's you, I understand. If that's where you're coming from, I understand. I have had lots of disappointments with prayer. But I have to conclude that despite my disappointment with prayer, believing in God still makes sense. God is not obligated to act upon my every wish in prayer. If you saw the movie Bruce Almighty, when God gave Jim Carrey, Bruce, all the power of God, and Bruce got all the prayer requests, and to make it simple, he just said yes to all of them. What happened? Chaos. So